How sun exposure causes cancer. Some people in this app like to debate on this. There is no debate, but I think a lot of people would benefit by knowing how UV exposure actually causes cancer on like a cellular level. First, we start with DNA. For those of you who don't know, DNA is like the instructions for everything in our bodies. It codes for proteins. It is made up of nucleic acids. Each of these nucleic acids basically signifies something different. There's like a bunch of instructions there in the code of those nucleic acids, and that's like our genetic code. And basically, all of those instructions for everything are in each cell in our body. So each cell in our body has the instructions for like basically everything about us. It's just not all of it is used in the same places. When exposed to UV, there's energy that's transferred to these nucleic acids, and it could result in a number of changes. The most common way that this happens is by creating what we call pyrimidine dimers. Pyrimidines are a type of nucleic acid, and specifically here we're seeing a representation of two thymines, two pyrimidine bases that were sitting next to each other on the strand of DNA. Because of that energy being transferred to them cross-linked, they attach to each other side to side when really they're supposed to be attaching to other bases across from them. That's what creates this beautiful double helix we see when they're cross-linked. That double helix ain't right. The issue comes in when that section of DNA is replicated. Basically, when our cells divide, when our cells are making more cells, they have to copy the genetic code and make a new copy for the new cell. So when it gets to that section of DNA, the enzymes responsible kind of don't know what to do there. In some cases, we could have a silent mutation by which changing that thymine to something else results in the same protein in the end, and it's no big deal. We can also have a missense mutation. A missense mutation is when a change in that thymine results in a change in the eventual protein that's made because the instructions are saying something different now. There's also what we call nonsense mutations, and that's when the new code that's in there codes for what's called a stop codon, meaning it says just stop making this protein. And so, like, the protein's too short and doesn't work. So, why are we not all mutants right now? If we go in the sun and we're exposed to UV and so many other things that could damage our DNA, how are we not like a big ball of mutations? Two reasons for that. Actually, like the majority of our DNA doesn't code genes. It's probably important for other reasons, but the part of our genetic code that actually codes for protein is pretty small. And the second thing is we have ways of repairing our DNA. So, you could see here excision repair as one example. You have your thymidine dimer here. There's enzymes that find it, pull it out, and replace it with a new thymine pair next to each other, therefore repairing the DNA. However, this is not a fail-safe mechanism. There are times when this process will not work. Though those times are rare, we could see what happens with them in people who have mutations in the genes responsible for the proteins that fix DNA. One such genetic disorder is called Xeroderma pigmentosum. So, this is actually a condition where there's a mutation in one of the enzymes responsible for DNA repair. You could see here in this very young child, they have sun damage all over the face. That's because they have no way of repairing sun damage at the genetic level. These people will end up with sun damage very early in their lives, but they also develop many, many, many skin cancers over the course of their life because those DNA repair mechanisms that kind of save us from our UV exposure are not in their cells. They can't do that. People with this genetic disorder quite often undergo treatment for skin cancer very young, and they have to be extremely diligent about protecting their skin from the sun because they don't have the same protective mechanisms as the rest of the population. There are two main gene types that we could think about that are genes that we really don't want mutations in. One is a proto-oncogene. These are genes that regulate cell division. So basically, if they get mutated and become an oncogene, there is then a lot of new cellular division happening, and that's a hallmark of cancer. Basically, when these are activated more by their mutation, it's driving more and more cellular growth, and a tumor can form. On the other hand, we have tumor suppressor genes. So these are genes in our genome that are responsible for processes that basically like tamp down cancer, notice when cells are dividing the wrong way and stop them or kill them. So they can come in two forms, either caretaker genes, like the ones that I was talking about that are mutated in Xeroderma pigmentosum. Those are the genes that are responsible for like editing our DNA and changing any errors. There's also gatekeeper genes that are responsible for suppressing cell growth. So just like those oncogenes drive it, these will suppress it. So if we get a deactivating mutation in either of these kinds of tumor suppressor genes, that's also something that's bad. That's the basic idea of how UV exposure causes skin cancer. Please let me know any questions in the comments.